This is the BreadWinner Podcast, hosted by entrepreneur, influencer, and sales wolf, Tyler Harris, bringing you the insights from the most successful forward-thinking entrepreneurs and influencers, so that you can rise to the top and make more dough.
Now, let's get into the show.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the BreadWinner Podcast. I am your host, Tyler Harris, and today, I'm extremely excited because we have a very special guest all the way from Singapore. We've got Mr. Eric Feng, and I'm going to do a quick intro of Eric here in just a second, but on a personal note, I just want to say that I met Eric. I met him at an event called the Disruptive Innovation Disrupt Tour out in Huntington Beach. Eric flew in all the way from Singapore. We got to hang out in California. And I got to tell you, man, you were just one of the most genuine people that I've been around. And your level of expertise and professionalism from the stage just blew me away. I mean, it was awesome. And it was so cool. I think I mentioned to you after the event that a lot of the things that you talked about were literally the basis of the success that we've had with our organization, which was awesome to see somebody else understand those small little things that have played such a huge role for us. But let me tell you guys a little bit about Eric, and then I'll bring him on to introduce himself. But in 2013, Eric spoke for the first time in the $1 Million Roundtable Experience, a prestigious industry conference attended by 6,000 financial service professionals from all over Asia. Eric received his first standing ovation, and his career as a sales strategist also took off. He became the guy to talk to if you want to become highly sought after in your market. Today, he's a well-known personality in the financial services, real estate, and direct marketing industries in Asia, having spoken in over 20 cities in Asia to more than 50,000 salespeople. I was told this year he is also going to be speaking in Prague. Is that right? And Budapest. Yeah. And man, I couldn't be more excited to have you here. I also want to talk about your book because I think it's incredible. And man, thank you for being here, Mr. Eric Feng. I know it's 12 hours difference there in Singapore.
Yes, it's 9:07 p.m. and this is the highlight for my day.
I'm gonna start doing business only with people that live in Singapore because I like that it's a perfect 12 hours. So I don't have to think about what the time change is. I'm like, it's just 12 hours different.
Very true.
So much
very
easier.
True.
So Eric, tell everybody a little bit just about who you are, and you can go as far back as you'd like. I mean, this show is for you. But tell everybody kind of what your main focus is right now as well, and then we'll just go into some questions, a little Q&A back and forth, and we'll wrap this thing up.
Sure. I've always wanted to teach. That has always been my ambition since I was 6-7 years old, and to the extent where I'm the kind of person that would stay back in school, because in Singapore we have a morning session. So school starts at 7 a.m., it ends at 1 p.m. So at 1 p.m. I would go for lunch and I'll creep back to the classroom and I'll reenact every segment in the morning. It's my way of revision. Wow. So this is something I do a lot unconsciously because I just love playing with a whiteboard. I love playing with the projector. And one day I got caught by my teacher and she said, "What are you doing? Are you crazy? You're talking to yourself?" I said, "Oh no, I'm revising my work." And she said, "If you're really wanting to do this, then let's put some people in there. You got to help me run my remedial classes." So I said, "Yeah, sure." So I had 1 or 2 students and it grew. But I was very thankful for the opportunity because she, and together with some teachers, nurtured my love for teaching. So it has always been in me. The seed is planted. But I think the profound experience I had was when I studied in States. I got to experience Toastmasters, a public speaking organization. I got to experience the National Speakers Association. And all of a sudden I realized that, oh my God, I could teach at scale where I could speak at 1,000, 2,000. So that was some, when you get stretched like a rubber band,
yep,
you can never go back into your original size. But that's where the BUT comes in, the but. So when I was back in Singapore, I decided that I want to be a trainer. I want to start teaching. But because I was very young, I was only 24 back then, there was very, very little opportunities and there very little credibility I had. Most of my classes are like probably 10 people, 15 people. And these are people who are forced to come for class. They don't pay for the class. The company paid for the class. And I'm treated like a commodity during those classes. They will raise their hand. They will ask me, how old are you? And in a very condescending way. So my life wasn't very easy. And I felt like, in a bad way, I felt like I was a nobody, in a small hidden classroom, yet at the same time having big dreams. Now, it was during those moments when I realized something. The only reason why people see you as a commodity is because you have not positioned yourself as an authority. That was one of my biggest takeaway during those moments. I wish I was the one that discovered that. It was a mentor who told me this. He said that, Eric, the reason why you are a nobody is because you have not positioned yourself as a somebody. So, but you must understand, back then there was not much Facebook, Instagram going on. Social media was still very new. But that was when I started working really hard building my brand by making sure that I'm associating with the people that I want to be like. There's a saying, right? You're the average of the 5 people you hang out with. So I started hanging out with keynote speakers, international speakers, wanting to learn from them and be like them. And eventually, when Facebook became popular, I started putting my content on Facebook. In a very amateur way, right? Basically giving people sneak preview of what I do. And that was what opened doors for me to Malaysia. Malaysia is just right up north Singapore. And all of a sudden, I started doing work in Malaysia. And when I do work in Malaysia, I'll say, hey guys, follow me on Facebook. Take a look at what I do. They started sharing my content. And next thing you know, I'm in Philippines, I'm in China, and I started to grow. And I started to realize something that, you know what? There's no such thing as, there's always a saying, right? Be so good that the world cannot ignore you. But I'm sorry, man, that's just principle number 1. There's still principle number 2, and that is you got to tell the world about it. Especially in today's world where it's so noisy, where the people who are not that good are shouting so loud, they're spoiling the industry. And so people like us, if we really have a heart to serve, we need to speak up, we need to position ourselves out there, put ourselves out there, and become visible. So I think this backstory helped me build a brand for myself. I've been in this industry for the last 12 years, making a little name for myself in the training and the speaking scene. And in fact, when you met me in US, it's actually my first time speaking in the United States. So to me, it's a major milestone. And today, what I'm doing is I'm sharing my process of how a nobody could become a somebody much faster thanks to social media. So that's in a nutshell what I'm doing right now.
Man, that's incredible. There's so many things I'd love to unpack there, but I love how you mentioned as a child that you just knew that you loved to teach, and that you knew that being a coach or a teacher was what you wanted to do, even down to the fact that you loved whiteboards. I love that. Like that's so interesting. And so tell me, I have to ask, the swag that you have. You kind of got this style to you. Have you always had that since you were young?
No, of course not. No. Well, my best friend, I've known her for 30 years. She once said to me that if you disappear from the class, nobody will notice you. Yeah, so that's somebody who has been very close to me. So you have to understand that for a very good part of my growing up, I've always have self-esteem issues, right? Okay. I mean, we all have issues. Yep. I've always seen very little of myself, and therefore I'm not very confident. But I think the turning point was when I attended a program, a personal development program, and another profound experience. I remembered the coach got us to write down all our goals. And I was the first to finish writing a whole entire list of goals. I had like 20, 30 goals, and I thought that, wow, I'm going to ace the class. And he looked at me and he said, Eric, for you, I give you an additional assignment. I want you to write beside every goal that you've written down on the paper, who do you set the goal for? And then I wrote down, I want to be rich. Then I realized I set the goal for my mom. I want to be, somebody. And I realized I put my dad's name over there. And all of a sudden, I didn't even finish goal number 10. I broke down and cried because I realized that every single goal that I fought so hard to achieve were never for myself. They were all trying to make a statement, and they were just trying to prove. And he said, good, now you got to restart because you have not done your homework. I want you to set goals for yourself.
Wow.
And it was for the very first time, I think I was about 23 years old.
Okay.
For the very first time, I actually asked myself, if nobody's opinion matter, what do I really want for myself?
Man, that question by itself, and obviously there's no doubt that was a turning point for you, and kudos to that coach for putting that message out there and for embracing the discomfort of calling you out on that. Kudos to him or her. But that question right there, to me, has to be the basis of anyone that is coaching anyone, and that is, what do you want? What do you want? I recently hired a coach, and that was the very first day. The entire day was spent just talking about, what do you want? Like, what do you really want? Okay, yeah, I understand all that, yeah, but what do you really want?
Yeah.
And the follow up to that is about 50 times asking why. Well, why? Okay, I understand, but why? But why? And so the moment that I had with this coach, very similar to the moment that you just explained, I sat down with this guy for 15 hours in one day. And for the first 11 hours, he just kept asking me why. Why? Why are you doing all this stuff on social media and the vlog and the podcast and why? And I kept saying legacy. It was legacy. It's my legacy. This is, all this footage, all these recordings. This will live on forever. This is for my family. This is legacy. He's like, yeah, but why? But why? After about 11 hours of asking me why, he said, all right, I'm going to go grab a drink. I'll be back in 20 minutes. Just kind of write down what you're thinking, what you're feeling right in this moment. And I wrote down at the top of the paper, when he came back, he said, all right, just read what you wrote. I said, what type of legacy am I really leaving for my family if they're going to have to watch all these videos to hear the things coming out of my mouth that should be telling them in person?
Yeah.
And he was like, bingo. Okay, well, that took 11 hours. Now we can really start talking about setting some goals. And
oh my God.
But it's such an important thing for people to go through that process, and the majority haven't, of figuring out what they actually want. Yep. Not what does society tell them they want, not what do their parents think that they should do, not what is their employer, not what is their spouse, like what do they actually want, and then let's map out a plan to get there. Because I think there's so many people out there that have these plans mapped out and these goals set towards a location that they actually deep down inside don't really want to get to.
Yeah.
When you talk about success without fulfillment being the ultimate failure, to me that's it. That's arriving at a location and succeeding, but then realizing that you got what you wanted, but you didn't want what you got.
That would be very sad, and you realize you don't have much time left. That will have
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So tell me, man, you mentioned insecurities as a child, and I think we all deal with that. I've dealt with that a lot. One of the quotes that I love is that every successful person has a painful story.
Hey, of course, yeah.
And the part that I added on to that quote was, will your painful story have a successful ending? And that's the encouragement to everyone that's going through something right now. Tell us, if you will, just one of those painful stories or one of those painful periods of time in your life that now you look back on and you're so grateful that it happened for you, not to you, and it kind of shaped who you are today.
Sure. I have a lot of it. Well, okay, let me think. Okay, so I come from a very, I would say, simple background. We're not very well-to-do, right? Okay. So my dad was a taxi driver. My mom was a clinic assistant, and I have a younger sister. So just to give you a sense of how poor we used to be, McDonald's was a luxury for us when we were young. So I love McDonald's, so I get to eat 4 times a year. My birthday, my sister's birthday, my dad's birthday, my mom's birthday. And everything was okay when you are below 12 years old. But the minute you hit 13, where you become a teenager, you start to care a lot about what people think about you. All of a sudden, being poor, wearing hand-me-down clothes, it's not cool.
Sure.
It is very embarrassing, and my mom knows that. And so during Chinese New Year is a bit like your Thanksgiving where everybody gathers. My mom actually worked a double job to get me a branded shirt, a Burberry shirt. Not too sure if you've heard of that brand.
Yes.
Obviously, I could not sleep at night because I can't wait to wear it and show it off to my cousins, right? True enough, my cousins were very impressed. Like, oh, wow, this poor little boy have a very nice, shiny shirt. And that was it. But my auntie actually said something to my mom. She said, wow, is this really branded? And she yanked me just to check. the collar to see whether is it really a branded shirt. And it was. And my auntie said to my mom, she said, poor people will always be poor people. Don't try to act rich. Let your son wear a branded shirt. Now it looks like fake shirt. And my mom just laughed, right? Laughed it off. But at night, I caught her crying very badly on the phone, talking to somebody that I have no idea who that person was. But she cried and she said this, and I'll never forget what she said. She said that I'm a useless mom. No matter how I do, people still look down on us. And I guess that fundamentally changed my life, because I probably have never seen my mom cry. And I saw her cry, and I made a promise to myself. I was hiding behind the door, and I told myself, I'll never, ever let anyone look down on us again. Whether it's, who cares if my dad's a taxi driver and they're uneducated, but I'll never let them look down on me. And the very first thing I did was I stopped playing computer games. I realized that I want to study, I want to do well, because nobody in my family has ever got to a university. And I want to be the first one. And they were my drive. Wanting to prove that we are somebody has been a drive since 13 years old. And we did. And finally, I got into a university. They were very proud of me. And then I got into my career, and I tried to make some money so that I can take them for a holiday. So looking back, obviously, that struggle is a setup for all our successes. But that was what gave me the resilience and the conviction to really hustle when I was much, much younger. I remember when I was in my early 20s, I don't really go out a lot. I study a lot. I hang out with people who are older than me, because I realized that if I can hang out with them, one day I'll become like them. So it helped a lot. Yeah.
Man, that's an incredible story. I feel like there's a secondary lesson in that too, that your mom experienced and that you got to experience through your mom. And that is that no matter what you do, there's always going to be someone that has a negative opinion of that thing.
Absolutely.
And that's a huge thing that, Gary Vaynerchuk and so many people talk about, is not caring what others think. But I think that we have to kind of get past this, don't care what anybody thinks, because we're always going to care what other people think. That's the idea that you're just going to wake up one day and not care is just not true. Yep. But it's not letting the opinions of others impact your actions day to day, and not letting others' opinions impact your mindset towards what you're ultimately trying to achieve. And I think that was a case in point, that even when someone worked a double and worked extra to be able to provide something that was special for their son, that they still had someone that was hating on them for that, which is unbelievable. One thing,
and that's the reason why it's extremely important that we should never live our life for anybody, because and that's actually where confidence comes from, right? Confidence comes from having a positive self-image.
Absolutely.
And I think anybody who's listening to this, I think if you want to build a brand for yourself, or you want to be a somebody, number one is you need to acknowledge that you are a somebody. Because if you have to wait for somebody to tell you that you are somebody, then you're in trouble. Because I tell people all the time, do you feel happy when someone compliments you? And if you say yes, good luck to you. Because when someone criticizes you, you will be affected. Because compliments and criticism are just two sides of the same coin. Absolutely. So if you allow people to sway you by compliments, good luck to you. You're exposing yourself to criticism. So you have to do things not because you want people to compliment you. It has to go back to your why. Why you want to do it? Is it service? Is it because you want to prove to people that you're somebody? It doesn't matter. But it cannot be because you want adoration from people, because that's one of the most unreliable things in the world.
You're exactly right. And one thing that I've learned in working with this coach here recently over the past couple of months is that those that appear to have the greatest, largest egos actually have the least, which is interesting. And I've been studying a lot on ego, and when you talk about that idea of not caring what other people think. So my coach, he'll stand on stage in front of a couple thousand people, and he's very real and upfront in saying, like, I don't care about any of you. I don't care about a single person in here, but I'll do anything for any of you. But you are not of my concern. I am of my concern. And this idea, he calls it the king eats first. And that you have to take care of yourself first, then your family, And not until then can you take care of anybody else. Not until then can you really provide value. Like with social media, everybody's about add value, disproportionate value, and I'm going to add value, add value, add value. Well, if you're not taking care of yourself first, what value can you really add? How much can you really pour from an empty glass?
Well said.
And so for me, that's been an interesting vantage point looking at people now, because some of the ones that at first I thought, man, this is the most egotistical. I mean, this guy's just got such a big ego. But when you really look into it, you realize that it's just because he's coming across as though he doesn't care. But it's because he's putting himself first and he actually cares the most, which is, it's an interesting dynamic when you start unpacking that. One thing I wanted to talk about, because I think it's one of my favorite things about your country, and that is I want you to talk about the idea of the military and that everyone is required. I personally think that that's one of the greatest things that a country could do. But tell a little bit about your experience in the military in Singapore.
Oh, okay. Well, I wish I could say I'm patriotic and I'm like looking forward to serve the nation.
Sure.
But I remember that years ago when I knew I had to serve the national service, to me it's like sending me to prison, right?
I'm sure.
You gotta understand that in Singapore, having to serve the nation is a necessity because the rest of us, the boys, have to serve. And I remember it was extremely tough for me because to serve the military in Singapore, at least, it's a lot easier if you're physically able. Because a lot of our basic military training has got to do with endurance, discipline, and strength. So if you have no strength, no discipline, no endurance, you're going to suffer very badly in army. I hated army. I remember the first 3 months was horrible for me because I was not physically prepared for military, right? I was not even emotionally prepared because all of a sudden I had to stay for 3 months with 12 other guys that I have no idea who they are. And whether I like it or not, I have to stay with them, shower with them, serve the nation with them. It's not a very cool thing, especially since I have a lot of privacy, right? But I think what I got out of it, and it's funny how you never enjoy those moments, but it's on looking backwards that it became very meaningful for you. I think on a personal level, it helped me realize how weak I was during those 2 years in army, right? Because sometimes you need to put yourself in an environment, and that's when you can really have a good look at yourself.
Absolutely.
So I realized that, wow, I really have a lot to work on. So back then, I was still not very confident of myself, but I remember one thing that happened to me. I had a commander who spoke to me and put me aside. Because what happened was I was doing a project and for my officer, and he kind of said it sucks, and he was throwing a lot of expletives on me. And I was born in a family where speaking expletive is no, and all of a sudden when you have so much expletives being thrown on you, you basically just crushed. I was crushed, and I was in a military uniform crying in a parade in front of so many people, and it was so embarrassing. My commander put me aside and said, Eric, you really got to grow up. He said, Eric, you got to grow up. The world out there, it's going to be cruel, Eric. It's not junior college, right? To you, it's not high school anymore. Your mom and dad's not going to be there to protect you. You've got to protect yourself. You got to be man about it. And that was a tough pill to eat. And but I would say that was one of the beginning of how I had to crawl my way out of learning how to not seek external validation, but to see the best in myself and to keep working at myself. In other words, having a relationship with yourself.
And how many years are you required?
2.5 years.
2.5 years. Okay.
Yeah, it was horrible.
I love that because what you described is kind of my biggest mantra, and that is, if you seek discomfort, the world will deliver you pleasure. But if you seek pleasure, or if you seek comfort, the world will deliver you pain. And it's almost like your country has a process put in place to make it mandatory to experience discomfort.
Totally.
Because if that process wasn't in place, you would have never embraced that discomfort. You would have never on your own made that decision to join the military or the service.
Absolutely.
And because of it, you're better from it, and you've learned those lessons, and you have that frame of reference. As you progressed in your career, And I think it's interesting you mentioned that you wanted to teach, but then when you took your first, you said it was Toastmasters or...
Yeah, Toastmasters.
Were you a natural public speaker, or was that something that you had to really work on? Is that something that you enjoyed?
I really wish I was natural, then I wouldn't have suffered so much, but I was not good at it. I was not good at it. I mean, think about it, right? Somebody who struggles to accept himself, who suffers a lot of humiliation when he was younger. His friends are bigger, stronger, taller, more attractive. There's really not much that you can present yourself on stage. But the only reason why I did it was because I had a mentor. And if I look at my life, right, I think the only good thing that happened for me is I have a lot of great mentors. That's awesome. Who sees... sometimes when you can't see the best in you, it's okay. As long as you hang out with people who see the best in you. Absolutely. They are your crutches. They are your crutches. And slowly as you begin to fall in love with yourself, then you don't need those crutches anymore. So anyway, one of my mentors said, Eric, you got to work on your speaking skills, because in a corporate world, it's not about how smart you are. It's about your perceived competence, and your perceived competence comes from your communication skills. So I started working on it, and I remember I even joined a humorous speech contest because I wanted to challenge myself, and the only people that laughed was myself. And it was so funny. And then when I laughed at myself, then everybody laughed. So obviously I did not win in the competition, but someone told me this before. He said that it's never about how good you are today. It's about stage time. As long as you keep working at it, you will eventually get better. And I had 4 years to work on myself. I mean, there was no urgency because I was in school and I just want to work on it. So I realized by dropping my ego and learning to seek education and not validation, that has been a very big reason why I was able to then have a breakthrough in speaking. I was crazy about speaking. I spoke every day. I would go to a club and I'll just sit for 5 to 7 minutes to speak. The worse I am, the more I'll do it. In other words, I'm going against the tide. And every time I do it, I will ask for feedback. I will ask the people around me, what do you like about my speech? What can I improve? And don't tell me things like it's good. Just tell me honest truth, because I'm here to learn. I'm not here to get compliments. It was that process, and it was 4 years of that process that got me to now be seen as a natural, but it all came from all the blood and sweat. That's why there's a saying, right, that you got to, the man who sweat the most in practice bleeds the least in battle. Absolutely. So I was sweating a lot in practice, and that's why you see me bleed very little in battle. But it all came from that.
Yeah, it's the 7-year overnight success, right?
Or the 10,000 hours.
Yeah.
I think it was Malcolm Gladwell who mentioned that.
Tipping point. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love. There's so many good things that you just said. One of them, though, when you talked about dropping validation or the need for validation and seeking education.
Yes, that was very fun for me.
That's huge. And I also love what you just said about that it's not what you know, it's the perceived.
Accomplished.
Say again?
As we get more and more accomplished, we get some small successes.
Yep.
We start falling from grace because of that principle, because we forgot to seek education, because we think we're good enough. So the day when you think you're good enough is the day you start falling. Absolutely. And so I fought before because I thought I'm good, and then I started losing my competitiveness. And these days I just want to hang out with people who tell me the truth rather than telling me things that I like to hear.
Yeah,
this is the truth. That
and hanging out with people that are smarter and more successful, and that's one of those things where you look around and you're the smartest person in the room. You need another room, right?
oh wow, that was good.
And that's what it seems to me like you've done. Like you strategically over the course of your life have put in place mentors, and whether those mentors just happen to come into your life, but you embrace those relationships that allowed you to grow and allowed you to level up and level up and level up by bringing those people in your life. And that's exactly what happened to me when you talked about, seeing something in you that you didn't see in yourself. I mean, that was my story 4.5 years ago when some mentors came into my life. And I talk about the fact that, I even used the verbiage that they breathed confidence back into me because I was in a bad place, and they literally just willed me to go out and do what I needed to do. And then I was able to take those crutches off, like you said, and go do it on my own, which is so important. One last question I want to ask you.
Yeah.
Over the last few years, as you have perfected your craft, and like you said, now that it appears like a natural, 100%. Like when you were on stage and I saw you, I'm like, holy crap, this guy is a natural. And because it was man, let me just talk about this real quick. So your presentation that you gave, your keynote, it was funny. It was extremely educational, but the entertaining and educating was so intertwined that it's like people didn't realize that they were really just sitting through a lecture. Like you were giving an actual, like, the format of it was very much of a lecture. But it was so entertaining, and there were jokes, and the way you threw in a couple of those videos, like I still remember that one video, which just cracked me up with the people that stood up in the waiting room, and when the beep went off, that was just hilarious. I've watched it since then. I've showed it to some people, but it was very, very, very natural. And so, in that process of going from no experience and no natural abilities to now looking like a professional, a natural, what's one thing during that process that you quit doing that you think enabled you to succeed?
Whoa. No one has ever asked me this question. I'm going to think about it. Okay.
It can be a mentality. It can be something specific.
Wow. I got it. I stopped trying to do a good job. I start enjoying being on stage.
That's awesome.
Because I'm a perfectionist, and I have a goal, and I want to make sure I do well. I create that laughter. It's very technical the way I approach a speech.
Yep.
But the fact that because I was so technical about my speech, I squeeze all the joy out of delivering a speech. And I remember, I think it was last year when I did a speech for about 6,000 people. I was just sick and tired of being nervous about performing. And I say, you know what? Why am I torturing myself? I've done the work I need to do. Can I just play? Can I just enjoy myself? And it was one of my best speeches because people say, oh my God, Eric, we could tell you enjoy being on stage. You're fooling around. You do not take yourself too seriously. But it was fun seeing you like that. And it was fun seeing me like that as well. I was like a kid on stage.
Yeah.
I still delivered the points I need to, but it was at a total different level.
It's funny, and that's brilliant. And that's what we love about the great speeches is that it's authentic. And I think that's what's basically what you're saying is I want to get up on stage and be authentic. I don't want to get up on stage and give a good representation of what this information, the way this information should be conveyed. I just want to get up there and be me and educate people. And that's what people want to see. The interesting, as you're talking about that, for me, I love looking at the dynamics between quote unquote real life and social media. In the social media, that's what you're doing. So you've got, let's just take Instagram, for example. Your posts on Instagram are going to be professional, polished. Then you got your Instagram stories. That's a little bit like, hey, just got out of this meeting, headed to go get food. Hey, I'm in the elevator, just headed out, to this conference. Hey, I'm doing this and that. And it's more real. And it's almost to me like what you're saying is you wanted to combine those two on stage to where you have the professional side, the polished side, and that's the preparation. But then you have the Instagram story side, which is the real Eric.
Yeah.
And can I prepare enough to where the professional side becomes unconscious and I can just get up on stage and be the real me while conveying the message that was prepared to convey? And the result of that is everyone sitting there and they're able to receive that information from a real person because you're being real. And I think that's the best of both worlds.
Yeah, because, speaking is all about influencing. But if I cannot relate to you, I would be very resistant to your influence. So when we as a speaker or a salesperson, we are authentic or we are being ourselves, in a way that creates a connection with your customers, they're going to be very open to your influence. And, Tyler, as we were talking about this, I need to make this point. Otherwise, I'll regret not telling you this.
Sure.
There was another thing that I stopped doing. And that is, I stopped worrying about what my audience think about me. Instead, I started worrying bigger. I worry that when I leave the stage, I did not change my audience. I did not make a point that is going to make a difference to my audience, which means I stop saying the things that they like to hear, and I start saying things that makes them very uncomfortable.
I love that.
I remember 2 weeks ago, I delivered a speech for 200 people. It's a speech on entrepreneurship, and I got them to raise their hands and say, how many of you want success? How many of you want this DVD that I'm about to give away? And they raised their hands. And then I said, okay, cool, come get it. And they were stunned for a while, and people started walking up front. There were 200 people, but only 30 DVDs to give away. And there were about 30 of them that came up, and they grabbed the DVD, and obviously many of them did not get the DVD. They were very disappointed. And all of a sudden, it just hit me, and I said something. I said, do you realize something? Just because you raise your hand and you say you want a DVD, it doesn't mean you're going to get the DVD. And I say, guys, you know what? You've been raising your hands telling people you want success, but I'll tell you what, just because you raise it doesn't mean you're going to get it. Face it. This is life. Yep. And I would never have said that, but I just felt compelled because I need to get my point across. Yep. And I tell you, you could hear a pin drop. You can hear a pin drop. And later on, the organizer said that, Eric, that was one of the profound moments. And I realized that profound moments come when you make them uncomfortable. Absolutely. And a speaker who only cares about what people think about them will never put their audience in discomfort because they are so in a hurry to get their audience to fall in love with them. Yeah. That's what I stopped doing. And that's why I'm at a level that is a lot higher than where I used to be. But because of you asking me that question, it helped me realize that. I didn't realize it until today when you asked me that question. And so anybody who's listening to this, it doesn't matter if you're a speaker, an influencer, a salesperson, you got to worry bigger. You cannot worry about what people think about you. Instead, you got to worry that when you leave, you did not leave the person in a better place. That you should worry more.
Man, that was so good. That was so good. That's what separates the good from the great, I think, in regards to speaking. And when you get to that level where a lot of that is being able to sense, but not just sense, but act on the energy in the room, man, I've witnessed it. I've experienced it myself to a small degree and hope to experience it a lot more often and in a lot greater degree. But the ability to stand on stage and to feel something leading you to go maybe astray from your outline and your PowerPoint and your main message from that day, but because the energy in the room and something you just feel like for example, my coach was speaking at an event. There's about 600 people in the audience, and he's talking about social media, about entrepreneurship, just business in general. And he said that all of a sudden he just felt very intensely that he needed to ask a question.
Oh.
And so he did. And so he said, hey, let me stop here for a second. Show of hands, how many of you in the room here have ever thought about killing yourself?
Oh, my God.
And just like you said, you could hear a pin drop. Everyone's like, what? I thought we were talking about social media. I thought we were talking about building a business. Next thing you know, almost every hand in the audience is raised.
What?
Then he said, okay, all right. He said, everybody put your hands down. Now, raise your hand if you've ever told anybody else that before. And there was only like 5 or 6 hands that went up. And he said, for the remainder of the talk, we're going to talk about that. And just completely did a 180 on his discussion. But resulted in probably one of the most impactful conversations that those 500-600 people had ever witnessed.
Wow.
And I've done this myself before in a talk where I asked, what's the one thing in your life that you keep pretending isn't a problem? And the hint is whatever just popped into your brain, that's it.
Yep.
and so let's work on that now Because until you take care of that, then there's no reason to even move forward and talk about all the other things that I have on my outline here that we need to talk about for you to grow as an individual until you deal with that. Yep. And if you could have dealt with it already, you would have. If you could have dealt with it yourself, you would have. And so let's actually sit here and figure something out that we can leave having accomplished something that really means something. But the ability to sense that energy and then act on it and know that it's going to make people uncomfortable, but to do it anyway, and because of the fact that, just like what you said, that it's not really of your concern that the people in the audience like you, yes, or that they think you're a great guy, that you have to worry bigger and know that when I get off this stage, will there have been a change? Will I have been a catalyst for some change in that person's life or not? And that's pretty cut and dry. And that, by disregarding the feelings of those people in front of you, is the only way that you can get yourself to ask the right questions, to pose the right discussions, creating an uncomfortable environment to where people can get real, which how often do people, especially in a conference or an event type environment, ever have the opportunity to get real?
Precisely, yeah.
But I think the somewhat of a catch-22 in that is the majority of speakers are really just salespeople. They're really just on stage with a eloquent sales pitch of themselves and their products, versus a speaker that's on stage actually trying to make an impact. And sometimes it's easier for an audience to resonate with the speaker that's just giving a sales pitch, because that's what we're used to. That's the common practice of, oh, I'm going to go hear such and such speak. They're going to speak for 20 minutes. They're going to talk about their book for the remainder of the time. They're going to talk about all their courses that I can go buy. At the end, the price is going to drop 4 different times to this, this day only. And if you use this code, and for this crowd only, and for this event only, and this, and now we're going to cut that to $99 a month from $300, and you're getting this and you're getting that. And man, I can't hardly sit through those anymore. Yep. As soon as those right hooks come in, it just makes me sick to my stomach, knowing good and well that person was given a platform that day that could have made a gigantic impact in even just one person's life that's sitting in that crowd, and the ripple effect that could make. But they chose to use that time for themselves. Mm. And I think that's where the most interesting part of that dynamic is, when you don't care about what the people in front of you think, you're able to say the things that show that you care more about them than even yourself. It's like, so I'm saying, like, I don't care about any of you, but by saying that and by feeling that, I'm able to say the things that are going to show you that I care more about you than anything in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, it's ironic, right?
It's a catch-22, but I think it's a very interesting topic. But man, I can't wait to get to know you better. I'm coming to Singapore for sure. We're gonna do something. We're gonna do something in Singapore.
Yes,
we're gonna set it up. We're gonna make it happen. But man, tell everybody that's listening to the podcast and watching this on the vlog, tell them where they can go to find you, because I want to make sure they do that. We're running out of time here on this podcast. We're going to jump on a Sales Wolves podcast. For those of you that are listening to the BreadWinner podcast now, we're going to do a more in-depth interview on the Sales Wolves podcast. But we didn't even get to mention your book, which I love, because it's like
we can talk about it later.
It's like a coffee table book for salespeople, right?
Future selling. Yeah,
it's incredible. The illustrations. Did you do those illustrations yourself?
Yes, I did, because I love art. So it's my way of creative expression.
That's awesome. But tell everybody where they can find you. That way they can follow you online.
Well, I would really love to connect with every one of you who's listening to this podcast. I want to hear your thoughts about my conversation with Tyler. I want to hear your backstory as well. So hopefully you're on Instagram. If you're on Instagram, then you can follow me on Eric Goals Global. ERIC Goals GOES Global GLOBAL. Look forward to connect with all of you there.
And you mentioned that you're going to be speaking in Budapest and what was
Prague.
the other?
Budapest and Prague in September.
Awesome. So Eric is going global.
Working on it. It's on my vision board.
That's awesome, man. Well, I cannot thank you enough for not only being on, but for being on at 9 p.m. in your time, which is 9 a.m. my time. But, man, I've really enjoyed the conversation, enjoyed getting to meet you in person. For those that are listening, you can sense the genuineness in Eric's voice, but it's even more real in person, and I think that's rare, so it's refreshing. But guys, with that, make sure that you do check out Eric on Instagram at Eric Goes Global. And with that, this is the BreadWinner Podcast. I am your host, Tyler Harris, and we will see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the BreadWinner Podcast. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast and leave a rating on iTunes for a chance to be on the show. Send a screenshot of your iTunes rating to @TylerHarris page on Instagram, where he'll pick one person every single week. See you next time on the BreadWinner Podcast.